One of the biggest things that people used to talk about during COVID was mental health. And because of people being in isolation, the biggest concern for people was that they were isolated and they needed to be checked up on. There was a lot of people that were doing welfare checks to make sure that their family members, neighbors, etc., were doing fine. They were able to cope because they were pretty much confined to just their homes and were not basically allowed out. They weren't allowed to socialize, and it played a big factor. But come today, we are actually dealing with a very different situation. Now we're coming out of COVID. They don't have issues when it comes to meeting family, going out with friends, going to the gym, shopping, etc., which has helped them cope with any other stress that they've had. But now, with the new stress of what inflation has done, it has actually played a bigger factor when it comes to the mental health of individuals. Reducing debt, saving more, and spending less has a direct correlation as to how an individual is financially comfortable, if they're coping, or stressed financially. These factors are now affecting individuals on how they handle themselves. I was reading this article that was published by Global News, and in this article, the National Payroll Institute had surveyed 1,500 working Canadians. And in this report, it was actually interesting to see what the sentiment was and how these high inflationary times with high interest have affected their mental well-being. So in this survey, one of the biggest things that they had pointed out was it was more difficult to save now than it was 10 years ago. These are people that have been working for over 10 years, and now they're actually seeing that it's very difficult for them to actually save, hence giving them that anxiety of not having enough saved for a rainy day. Now, one of the most frightening statistics is that 63% of these working Canadians are actually living hand to mouth. They're basically spending their entire paycheck just to stay above water. Now, that is pretty scary considering that in Canada, we've got higher immigration, we've got a housing crisis, and now we're also having an issue where houses are unaffordable. If we have these types of issues and we're looking at the mental well-being of Canadians, this is actually not a very good predicament. Furthermore, I don't know how enticing Canada can be to actually attract more immigrants to the country. Now, many people will say that no, we don't need any more immigration, but immigration is probably the only thing that will help this country grow. On top of the 63% of people that are basically living hand to mouth, 30% of those people are actually going over and above, which are now probably going into using facilities like a payday loan or using perhaps some equity from their home to subsidize their current living situation. So for every dollar spent by a Canadian, they are actually in debt at $1.85. Now, we have seen that number coming down slightly because people are not spending, but those that do need to spend are going into debt just to keep the roof over their head. 66% of the people that were surveyed are actually feeling financially stressed, and 50% of those people are feeling overwhelmed. Now, if pretty much the majority of these people are feeling this way, I personally don't think it's a very good situation. I'm not here to necessarily prescribe a solution because I think there's so many different facets, and the minute we try to tackle one area, it will have another side effect somewhere else. And so this vicious cycle continues. And just like the economy, when one thing is adjusted, some fiscal policy adjustments, there's always an adverse effect. So if you do have some input, comment below and let me know how you think we could perhaps fix this particular situation. The only thing that I can really foresee right now is that interest rates are going to come down next year if people can hold on. And hopefully those that are due for renewals will not necessarily need to face such an increased mortgage payment, as many Canadians who actually have faced that for the first half of 2023 have done so. And those that were weak had to basically sell simply because they could not afford the mortgage payment. Unfortunately, when they did try to sell, they were not able to get top dollar simply because people were not able to qualify for a mortgage. And those buyers who basically cannot qualify for a mortgage are sitting on the sidelines, whereas a strong buyer can actually come in and try and get that price to a point that they actually like and not you as the seller really wanted. So when it comes to the mental health, 55% of those that were surveyed feel they are more isolated due to the rising cost of living, and it's impacting those that are close to them. It's not just the individuals themselves, it's now being passed on to family members in the house. And if we look at how this trickles into the actual workforce and businesses itself and how does it affect them there, 40% of them are saying that it actually is affecting them in their workplace. 20% of these people actually need a sick day to cope with this additional stress that they're feeling. And 10% of these people have actually left their jobs. But the problem is that if they've left their jobs, they're now becoming a burden on the government and having to subsidize, at least for some time being, until they have built enough confidence in themselves to try and figure out how do they root themselves out of this problem that they're in. So many people would say, well, okay, if you're facing financial stress, well, you should take on a second job. And believe it or not, an additional job is not necessarily going to be the solution for them. And the other thing is that even if you did take that on, will that actually stop the bleeding? My personal opinion is yes, you can use it as a crutch, but overall, for when it comes to your health, your family's health, it actually becomes tougher for you to be able to take on a second job, not being able to spend time with your family, or if people are feeling the stress of how it's affecting them socially currently, then you're definitely still not going to have a life by having an additional job trying to patch this situation up. Now, in the short term, it may work, but I feel it's just a crutch. So in my opinion, what I'm seeing now is that household debt is the core of all evil. And because of this debt that Canadians have run up, whether it's competing with the Joneses and they want to have a kitchen, a new car, a new finish their basement, move. If you're chasing something, then there's going to be some big issues. If you are financially stable, that's a whole different situation. But based on the statistics that I've mentioned earlier, majority of Canadians are feeling the pressure. Now, when they say that you only have 1% of the top producers in Canada that are earning $100,000 or more, believe it or not, even within the $100,000 earners, 35% of the group that was feeling stressed are actually earning above $100,000 because of the household debt that they've created, whether it being cars or more of an expensive home. They are in a predicament where they're trying to keep the roof over their heads. And the worst part about how this is going to be navigated is that they could potentially even lose their life savings, which was all put into their homes, because Canadians pretty much value their principal residence, real estate, as the most important asset for them and their families. If you are having difficulty navigating through these very difficult times, I would highly encourage you to book a call via my Calendly link. We can discuss all things mortgage, real estate, trying to understand your situation, and we'll hopefully be able to come up with a solution. One of the things that I find that actually reduces some stress, it's not going to eliminate it all, is when you actually have a plan together. If this plan is put together and you're able to enact upon it, then I think that your stresses are more directed towards how to get out of your problem. Information is in the bio below. You can just hit the calendar link. We can arrange a Zoom call so we can discuss your personal situation. So if you are looking to actually relieve your stress, focus on not being reliant on debt. If you have the capital resources to do a renovation, to buy a car, to go on trips, do that. Do not go in debt to subsidize anything that you're doing. And if this particular time in our lives is not going to be the lesson for you, then you never will understand it and you will definitely lose in the long run. Make sure that you're running a tight ship and that you're able to navigate yourself through any situation and live a more comfortable life.